There's been a lot of discussion around the chance that the Philadelphia 76ers trade the number 3 overall pick, but according to Mark Stein, that may not be the case. We're going to talk a little bit about that, plus the Mavericks and how they're looking to explore a trade that could really help their team out next season. And what's the expectation to happen with Jonathan Kuminga? We now know that as well. We're going to talk about all 3 topics and more right after this.
Welcome to the number 1 place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, aka Six Man Shenanigans. My name is Hayes. You guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. Let's go ahead and get into it for today, y'all. And Memorial Day does not stop the work at all. So according to Mark Stein, we have a little bit of intel on what Philadelphia's draft strategy could be, where he says this: if there is a trade in Philadelphia's future involving the number 3 pick in the draft, don't expect the 76ers to move down very far on the 2025 draft board. League sources maintain that the 76ers are determined to add a dynamic young talent to their core after the tremendous fortune they enjoyed in the May 12th draft lottery. Such players are usually found by drafting as high as possible in the lottery, which is why when I appeared last Monday on the Phoenix Suns podcast, I relayed to my colleagues the recent report suggesting Philly might use the pick in trade packages to try to acquire an established vet. Like Durant had been strongly debunked when I checked them out. So, there's been a lot of talk around the Philadelphia 76ers and the potential of going out and pursuing a guy like a Kevin Durant to add to this team so that they can try to maintain that window open during Joel Embiid's time. Well, according to this report, that does not seem like what's likely to happen here, that the Philadelphia 76ers have come to the realization that a lot of people already have, and that it's probably best for them to go ahead and maintain and hold on to that pick, or if they do trade down because they're not as enticed with the players that are there at number 3, that's suggested that they draft number 3, that they can move down, gain some more assets, and keep it moving forward. It seems like they may not be as high as Ace Bailey. They may not be as high on VJ Edgecombe. Maybe they want to add a shooter like Knuppel, right? Maybe they want to add a guy like that. Maybe they want to add another future big and trade down further in the draft to get a guy like Kaman Malawak, but still maintain some assets, right? Those type of prospects are there. So I think when you look at all of this, it does paint a picture where the Philadelphia 76ers are doing the right thing. You have Maxey there. You have McCain there. You could add another young dynamic talent. You got Dembana there as well, who, not to say that he looked like he's going to be a world beater or anything like that as a big in the next level, but I do think he's shown some things to show like, hey, let's go ahead and let's keep adding this, right? And let's see what we have here with this young core. And, I don't think that that's the wrong path to make. I personally think that they should really address and look into moving Joel Embiid. That's going to be difficult until he's proven that he's healthy a little bit, of course. I want to make no mistake about it. He's going to have to prove that he's going to be able to stay healthy. He's going to have to be able to prove that, I think, before you can. But if you make Joel Embiid available, there are going to be people that bite on it just because of the potential alone, especially depending on what you're asking to give up. But a Dembona, a player that I did like in last year's draft, he only started 11 games for them last year, finished the season as a starter, but he averaged 15 points, 8 rebounds, 2.5 blocks, and almost 1.5 steals on 74% shooting there. So, you could want to take a look at what a young core and a piece that actually makes sense there keeps doing, right? And even if a Dembana ends up being just a backup big, I think that, where you got him at last year in round 2, if that ends up being the case for him, great, right? So, what the 76ers is going to do here is going to tell a lot, right? A lot of people have said that the draft really starts at number 3 because if they do trade out of it, even if they do look to stay in the top 10, top 12, somewhere in the lottery, great, right? But if they look to do that, great. I don't think that that's a problem or a bad thing for them there. That's what the 76ers need to do. I understand why the talk came out about them potentially, going after a star to add to this, and could they be a contender? Yeah, I even said this, like if they added the right piece, if they did add a Kevin Durant, and Joel Embiid was healthy at the right time and for the largest part of the season, then okay. I think maybe you have something that you're cooking with here. But there's something to be said about having Jared McCain at 21 years old, a Dembana at number 22 years old. I mean, at number 22, at only 22 years old as well. Tyrese Maxey's 24, right? You got some guys here that you can start building a young nucleus. Now, how good that nucleus can be, that remains to be seen, right? But I think that this is an interesting season for the Philadelphia 76ers to take that chance, draft another young talent, and it's not a problem there. It's not a problem. I don't think that their window, I know the East is expected to be a little bit weaker next year with the Boston Celtics. They're going to come into the season hobbled. We don't know if Giannis is going to be on the Milwaukee Bucks. You don't know what's going to happen there. Do the Cavs, even though I don't think that they should, they look to do something? We don't know, right? But ultimately, I think the East could be a mirage as far as being wide open. But I think the 76ers have a chance to actually start. And the two timeline thing is difficult, right? And that's one of the most scary things about all this is living in a world of two timelines, right? We heard recently that not only are the Dallas Mavericks interested in re-signing Kyrie Irving for a deal for the next 3 years at $40 million apiece, keeping them in two timelines after they add Cooper Flag with Anthony Davis and things like that. Like, yeah, the 76ers would then theoretically be in the two timeline place, but I think that second timeline could become the timeline because you don't have a window right now open with Joel Embiid. He's too inconsistent. He's not healthy enough to even say that he does. So we'll see there. What the Spurs do at number 2 is going to really determine, I think, what the 76ers then do at number 3 if they trade down. There are a number of teams that make sense for them to try to trade up in that draft and that could have the assets, the Brooklyn Nets being one of them, right? They could definitely try to trade up with having the 8th overall pick, and they could sweeten the pot with one of the picks they have lower in the first round with 27, and maybe even get up a young player in that as well if they see it being worth it. They have a chance to do that. The Utah Jazz are another team that could very well do that. They're at number 5 in this draft. The Houston Rockets, even though I don't really think that they want to trade up to number 3, I think if they're trading number 10, they want that to go out and get a star, right? So, they're there. But I think there are going to be quite a bit of teams that make sense to try to trade up. And I think we're going to see a lot more movement at the top of that draft. And then that's going to kind of affect the teams below them because it could be a player that could have been projected to be on the board that ends up dropping or whatever, right? So we'll see what happens there. But I think Philly at number 3 is going to be a really interesting thing to see what they do. Or do they just keep the pick and draft whoever they want the most there, which would definitely throw off the draft board, especially if Ace Bailey falls past 3 and you're sending VJ and Ace Bailey down a step. But we'll see what happens there. But another team that's looking to do some things with their core potentially is the Dallas Mavericks, right? We just talked about them and the fact that it had been said that they are open to re-signing Kyrie Irving and using the last year of his contract if he opts in as a starting place on a long-term deal, right? But it seems like the Dallas Mavericks may also have interest in another point guard, and that is Jrue Holiday, right? So this one also comes from Mark Stein on the Stein line that talks about this. He says this: league sources say Dallas is expected to at least explore whether there are feasible trade pathways to Jrue Holiday. Complicated is that it would likely be given the 3 years and $104 million still left on Holiday's contract. So Holiday's contract is huge, right? And that's part of the reason that the Boston Celtics will be looking to move off of it. I find it interesting that even with potentially re-signing Kyrie Irving, that you would be interested in making a move for Jrue Holiday for the size of the contract that he has there, but maybe he does make some sense there, right? Now, it was said in this as well that they would probably trade P.J. Washington or include P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford in any potential trade for to the Celtics there. And I do think that offers something for the Boston Celtics to be interested in, right? You're trying to break up the big contracts that you have there, being able to get 2 youngish players back, right? They're still, at the start of their NBA career, right? And P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford. We know that they potentially could be looking to move Kristaps Porzingis as well. That could be a nice starting off point, right? If you're able to get PJ and Daniel Gafford in for that one, right? So that could make it a realistic move where the Boston Celtics are interested. They're breaking one contract up into 2 contracts at players that have been on teams that have gone on finals runs before, right? So, it'll be interesting. And I do think what the Boston Celtics do with their pieces, right? The Al Horford, who's probably just going to walk. He may even retire. Kristaps, Jrue Holiday. I've even seen some things that Derek White could be somebody that they look to move. I doubt that. I wouldn't want to see them move Derek White, but there are a lot of teams that are going to be watching to see what Boston does, because if they decide in this maybe board year for them to make this move and take a shot at some younger players, we don't know what's going to happen yet with Jaylen Brown, if he's going to have that meniscus surgery, which could leave him out for a little while as well. And the Boston Celtics could look to be bringing something up, right? Chris Paul has also been mentioned as a possible free agent target for them as well. Could be somebody that actually helps Cooper Flag a lot in that first year and is that stopgap guy there. The Dallas Mavericks also are rumored interest in Lonzo Ball as well, which would really be interesting, seeing as how the Bulls did not trade him to the Memphis Grizzlies for what became the 18th overall pick in this draft. But, we'll see what it comes down to with that one. But with Irving expected to miss at least the first few months of the season as he recovers from ACL surgery, we'll see what happens there when it comes down to it. But keep a lookout. The Dallas Mavericks clearly are going to be looking to make a move for a point guard in some shape, form, or fashion, whether that's free agency or a move like Lonzo Ball, where it's only a $10 million contract with the player option at the end of the team option at the end of next season, which could mean that, hey, they can use him for this year. He doesn't work out. They re-sign Kyrie, and then they can let him go. So, it's interesting to watch how that all shakes out for the Dallas Mavericks, but does seem like they're going to be active on that point guard market, and we'll see who they end up trying to bring in here. Now, another name that is available this offseason, reportedly, he is going to be a restricted free agent at the bare minimum, and that is Jonathan Kuminga. Now, there's been a lot of talks about what it could be for Kuminga, right? The chances of him coming back there, all those type of things, right, when it comes down to it. But per ESPN, this Kevin Pelton of the ESPN, is that, right now they're trying to figure out what the best path is, and that the Warriors can't come to terms with a deal on him. They are looking at sign and trade scenarios for him, right? It said this: the best thing that happens to him is if they sign and trade him, right? And the reason part of that is that he can get more money in the sign and trade, right? Also, the Warriors then would get something back for losing a 22-year-old that definitely is somebody that can also, still has a lot of room to grow. And Pelton also wrote this: at 22, Kuminga should become a more consistent contributor over time. That's probably the more likely with the team besides the Warriors, given the way Kuminga's skill set overlaps with those of Butler and Draymond Green. And it's possible Golden State could be open to a sign and trade deal to rebalance their roster. And also said that, as with every restricted free agent, Brooklyn looms large. If the Nets believe in Kuminga, they have the ability to shape their roster around him. The Bulls could try to put together a sign and trade, perhaps sending Vucevic to the Warriors and placing Kuminga in a role similar to the one DeMar DeRozan had once played in the Windy City. So they're going to be suitors for Kuminga. The question is that how do the Warriors play a part into that? Is he just signing an outright restricted free agency deal, which really the only team with enough money projected right now is that would be the Brooklyn Nets. They are the team that can offer him the most money as a restricted free agent. But being willing to do a sign and trade really opens it up to any team that has pieces that the Golden State Warriors are interested in and that the other team are willing to deal, right? So a sign and trade is probably the most likely scenario here, unless it's the Brooklyn Nets. And even then, the Brooklyn Nets could sign him to an offer sheet and still work out a sign and trade. So a sign and trade is probably the best outlook that you're looking at if you're Jonathan Kuminga, and it gets more teams interested, right? So if a team that doesn't necessarily have the cap space right now to be able to go out there and get a guy like Kuminga, but they want a guy like him, sign and trades are the way to do so. And that is a weapon at the disposal of teams. And that's the purpose of it. It's to put teams in a position where they can work out something to not lose their free agents for nothing. Now, with restricted free agents, it gets a little bit tougher to deal with, right? But mainly because of only half the base level salary counts towards salary matching if you do a restricted free agent sign and trade. But that could actually maybe work out in the Warriors, maybe in the other team's path as well, right? So, we'll see what happens there. It's something to watch and something to monitor for, if you can, and we'll see what happens there, man. Overall, I do think between the draft and things, this is going to be a very active offseason around the NBA. You're probably going to see a lot of decently names around, as well as just new faces and new places, which happens every offseason. But I think the mechanisms to get there and how that combines with the draft this year, you're going to start seeing some movement around and teams start putting themselves in a position to maybe make some moves in some of these free agents. This isn't the best free agent class. I think that, there are going to be a lot of teams as well kind of setting themselves up to be more active in the summer of 26. But this is a offseason where you still can, not only can you make moves to put yourself in that position, but you can also make moves to maybe get some guys ahead of them and work out contract extensions as well. So, that's it. I think John Collins is another one that you're probably looking at being involved in some of this as well. So just keep a lookout for that, y'all. That's all I'm saying here. I think that this offseason is going to add some clarity to what next offseason could look like. But it all starts at the draft. In a lot of ways, it all really starts at number 3. What happens at number 3 with Philly and what they do, and I think some other teams as well, as far as moving their assets, their pieces. My Bulls, for example, with Kobe White, Nikola Vucevic could make some movement as well. Like, this is going to be a fun offseason. And, we get to cover it all here at Six Man Shenanigans, aka NBA Central. But as always, let me know how you guys feel on everything down below. Make sure you guys are following us at NBA Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and or voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball related. I'll see you guys the next time I feel like making an episode. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.